All right, welcome everyone. My name is Stephanie Wolf. I'm the Executive Director of NAIOP Minnesota. Thank you for joining us early on a Monday morning. I just have a couple quick announcements before we get started. I just want everyone to stay on mute while the panel is talking. And if you have a question, you can type it in the chat. We'll also have time for some questions likely at the end, so you can ask those at the end as well. And with that, we just want to turn it over to today's moderator, Susan Farr, who's the VP of Business Development and Marketing at Ebenezer. Susan?
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to kind of go over the agenda and then we'll introduce ourselves. So this morning, we're going to have the senior living sector, care types of the different communities, some of our opportunities and challenges in 2021. Senior living in Minnesota, and then at the end there's some resources. So I'm Susan Farr. I'm the VP of Business Development at Ebenezer, and I've been there for 14 years now, and this is all I've done since college. So I'm really excited to be here, and we have some great, Julie is going to introduce herself next. Some great presenters this morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Ferguson. I'm the national sector leader with Ryan Companies. I am based in our Austin office. We build senior living all across the country. And I have also, like Susan, been doing this since I got out of college, so longer than I want to admit. I think I'm rounding up to the over 25 years of experience at this point, which is, you know, lots of experience. I've seen a lot of different industry trends and excited to share some details about the senior living business with all of you today.
Mark, would you like?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so Mark Nelson. So I am with United Properties. I have been here since '99, just at UP. So I've been been fortunate to be kind of a ground up developer my entire career, which is over 30 years now, unfortunately. But the good news is, yeah, the senior side is very exciting. So I oversee all of our senior living development for United Properties. And we are based here in Minneapolis. We have offices in Denver and Austin. And then senior-wise, we have properties down in Southwest Florida in addition to those markets. So that's probably enough for me for now. Yeah.
So to kick off, what is the senior living sector? Julie is going to talk about that slide, which is a green bar. Okay, and the next slide. Yep. Perfect.
Yep. So the senior living sector certainly has been highlighted a lot over the last 18 months. Because of the pandemic, and I'm sure all of you have read plenty of articles about nursing homes and assisted living and how we as an industry have sort of weathered some of those challenges. I think part of our challenge as an industry is there's not a lot of knowledge or education about it. So when you read some articles, it's frustrating for us sometimes because the reporters don't necessarily understand the differences between what it is that the senior living industry offers versus what a nursing home is. And so wanted to give everybody a little bit of context as Mark and I and Susan talk about the industry. And for us, it's very obvious. For everybody else, I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And so really, it starts with this senior-only apartments, or what you'll hear today, either 55 plus or age restricted. And that's really an apartment that simply has an age restriction overlay on it. A lot of times there's municipalities that don't want to approve traditional multifamily because of traffic or because of the burden that it might place on schools. So the 55 plus is a great option for municipalities to still get the multifamily and the density, but it has an age restriction on it. Now we say it's 55 plus as the age restriction. In reality, the people moving into those communities are really in their 70s. And so that's, you know, while this restriction's 55, our average age in those communities is about in the early 70s. The next level is the independent living, and it certainly still has a real estate and housing component, but along with this, you start having a lot of services as it relates to meals, activities, and then housekeeping, but there is not a care component associated with independent living. And that is typically the average age there is closer to 80, which for those of you who have either parents or grandparents who are in that age, of course, they would tell you they're too young to move into independent living if they're 80. Assisted living is the next evolution of this, and this really adds the care component to it. And the care from an assisted living component varies by state as what we're allowed as far as care that we can provide to our residents, but it certainly includes things such as assistance with bathing, assistance with medication. And then again, depending on the state, it depends on how much care we can actually provide to people. Then the memory care piece is assisted living, but it's a very specialized component of care for people with dementia or Alzheimer's. And so it adds a very programmatic piece as it relates specifically to caring for people with dementia-related diseases. And then finally, the skilled nursing component, which really jumps into the people who might be bedbound, long-term chronic care, or short-term post-acute if you've had some type of surgery. This skilled nursing component, the majority portion of this is typically paid either through Medicare or Medicaid. And these other levels, the assisted living and memory care, while sometimes Medicaid helps pay for them in some states, it is typically a private pay component that happens in the assisted living and memory care component of that. So the fascinating thing about senior living, and what has really kept me in the business all of these years, is the fact that senior living is a whole lot of things. It's real estate, it's healthcare, it's hospitality, it's food service. And so it really combines a whole lot of industries into one. And so it's a challenging business, but it's an interesting and very rewarding business as well. And that's really, that's what makes it a very unique component in the real estate world. You can go to the next slide, Stephanie. And I'm sure, again, I don't have to tell all of you about the increase in the aging population, and the reason that all of us find this to be a very compelling business. So the demographics sort of speak for themselves. You know, the baby boomers, although they're not quite ready to move into our communities. I think the first one just turned maybe 65 this year. So we've got probably about 15 more years before they start moving into our communities. But they're certainly coming, and it'll be the one time, and it'll be the largest population over the age of 75 in history. Increasing life expectancy, I think this was continuing on the rise, and then maybe with COVID we had a little bit step back, but certainly with technology and aging more healthy, increasing life expectancy is certainly continuing. The industry has been around for a long time, really, you know, over 40 years, but as it is today, I would say it's really the past 20 to 30 years that it exists as today. And we've, most of the existing inventory is older. And while we have been in a building frenzy pre-COVID, we still need to build more units to be able to serve these baby boomer generation that's coming in the next 15 years. And a lot of the product that's out there right now is aging and needs a refresh, or there needs to be some new product out there. Historically, it's been a recession resilient asset class. During the great financial crisis, it was the one industry where rents really stayed the same and occupancy stayed the same. It did weather COVID. We're certainly still in the throes of that. Occupancy did decrease and quite significantly during COVID, and we are seeing an increase in occupancy now in the last few months, which has been great. And so we'll see how that continues to increase. So this really refers, this recession resilient really refers to the great financial crisis, and the COVID piece of it. The jury's still out how we'll fare, but right now feeling pretty good about making the comeback. It is the largest growth market
Say, Julie, I just started
since
to
the
interrupt
global
you there.
financial. Yep, sure.
Yeah, I
Yep,
just was thinking,
absolutely.
so one kind of key point there coming out of the financial recession was why I think some of the institutions and developers focused on senior, right? So senior, I think just recently
Yep.
has become kind of an institutional asset class. And so COVID has upset that a little bit potentially, but that's, we all get our wheels in motion here. And so it's interesting. So as an example,
Yep.
At United Properties, we're a full commercial company, of course, but our senior strategic plan anyway, over the next 3 to 4 years, senior housing may be up to about 40+% of our development activity. And so it is a little concerning coming out of COVID because occupancy's grown, but also expenses have as well. And so whether we get back to the margins we were hoping for, I guess, is probably the ultimate way to be seen. So sorry there, but that's
Yep.
detail.
Yep. It's a great point. And from a Ryan Company's perspective, similar, Mark, it's a significant portion of our growth strategy as a company as well, amongst all the asset types that we develop. And we've continues to be looking at the 5-year plan, and so we'll see how that certainly plays out between construction costs and operating costs, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Yeah.
The value is approximately about $315 billion, and for those of you familiar with multifamily, that's a fraction of what multifamily is right now. And we had an average of about 8,000 units of assisted living for the last 5 years, but it's still to meet this demand that's coming 15 years from now. There's still work to be done. So it is a big business. As Mark said, financial institutions are very interested in this product and have raised private equity funds dedicated solely to funding senior living. And it certainly has captured a lot of people's attention. We can go to the next slide, Stephanie.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, it's an attractive pure return. I guess we don't have a chart there, but pure return metrics are attractive in senior. That's again historical, but why people are interested in the business. But I think there's the cautionary reality is the operating side of it, and there's a big marketing and sales side as well. And so we did talk about these independent types here already a little bit with Julie's comments. I guess I would say just again for kind of background knowledge, independent living, it's probably been referred to as congregate living in the past, if you've heard of that. There is a thing out there called a CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community, which kind of tries to wrap together all of the continuum, and that's kind of a buy-in model. So I guess what I just wanted to comment here is, typically independent living, assisted living, and memory care is a rental model, and then this CCRC is maybe a life care community. You might have heard of that, are kind of a big deposit downstroke, and then you're still paying a monthly fee, but hopefully your costs are somewhat mitigated in the future as your needs increase. And then the other on this slide here is a cooperative or a co-op. That is typically an independent ownership model. And that is something that actually was started here in Minnesota and that we have been doing for almost 20 years already. It's hard to believe. We've got 16 communities here in the Twin Cities area and are expanding into our Denver market as well. And I think we're just going to kind of give a quick background on that since it is unique to Minnesota. And so Susan, you can take the next slide.
Great. So Ebenezer being an operator and management company, we have 105 properties. And like Mark mentioned, in 1978, this was the first cooperative in the nation. And this is in Edina. It is still full with a very large 2-bedroom waiting list. And so that is, it's just exciting that, everyone came up with this idea in 1978. And so a lot of people, have enjoyed touring it and just kind of the legacy of it all. Next slide. So this is just a slide talking about that Ebenezer developed it and we owned and operated it, the board. This is still managed under Ebenezer. But what was interesting is Walter Mondale, the vice president, was at the grand opening, which we don't get many vice presidents at our grand opening these days. And then Lute Moberg, who this was his vision, he's the one sitting right next to Walter Mondale. And Lute was our president. Next slide. So they just talked about how they came up with the first age restricted co-op, the brainchild. There's a picture of Lute Moberg. The middle photo is every resident that had paid down on their share brought dirt from their home and they brought it all together and then they planted a tree and the tree's still living. So we're excited about that too. So, and I'm not going to get into every bullet about the reality and the driving force behind it, but it is exciting. And like I said, Lute Moberg was definitely very much a creative type. Sorry, my allergies. Next slide, please. So I'll just go over this and then I'm going to pass it to Mark. So a cooperative defined, a housing cooperative is a joint ownership in a housing development which members own a share. And there's a graph further in the presentation that really kind of helps define that share. Members or share owners are part of the cooperative which owns the building or land. And the cooperative structure brings back the spirit of the community, and everyone together contributes to a healthier, meaningful building. And it is really neat. My mom lived in a co-op and it definitely is very much they share everything. She signed up for all these different committees and she would change. She really enjoyed it very much. And when we went to sell it, it sold fast too. So we were excited about that. Mark, do you want to talk about the financial structure of a co-op?
Yeah, we can jump into that. Yeah, I think primarily all of them are funded by a HUD program, so a housing development federal program, which ultimately is a 40-year fixed rate mortgage, and it is a benefit to the seniors for a number of reasons. Number one, 40-year fixed rate kind of keeps their monthly payments down, and more importantly, as Susan just mentioned, the resale. Someone can come into, so 5 years after someone buys a home in this cooperative, the next buyer kind of takes that initial buyer's position. And so that's ultimately the difference between a co-op and a condominium, is there's one financial structure on the entire community versus individual mortgages on each condominium. The trade-off there is you don't own a piece of deeded real estate like a condominium. You actually own a share in this cooperative, corporation that owns all the building and all the grounds of that particular community. So that's kind of essentially the difference. So it's a little, it's a nuanced financial structure, one that I think causes people a little bit of concern, but truly acts no differently than a condominium, other than just the technical legal side of it. So people living there still are able to write off their taxes like you do in a single family home, and they still accrue interest and equity. The bigger piece on here, so the developer of a co-op acts as the sponsor. What that means essentially is we take on kind of the role of creating the corporation, bringing together the entire design and construction team, and are responsible for turning the building over to these new residents once the building is completed. And so the key here, and for, why this is an interest to United Properties, I guess, is it's a little bit of a balance on the risk continuum, I guess I'd say. We have to have a fairly significant pre-sale requirement. Their HUD on the books, actually, I think of the HUD regulations are 80% of the homes have to be pre-sold in order to secure this loan. We've been operating under a 60% pre-sale threshold, but that's a pretty big hurdle, and so there's a natural governor there on the size of communities. So typically most cooperatives are 100-ish or less homes, partly because of the marketing timeline it takes to get to that 60% pre-sale. And so we've seen a change here coming out of COVID. So again, this is a 70 plus on average senior. That's about the time when people decide that they are willing to kind of move into into community living. Number one, get out of the burden of owning their own home. However, they'd like to be with people of their own age and interests. And so that's kind of been the driving force here, is really just kind of downsizing. Average homes that we are building today are all 2-bedroom or 2-bedroom den, 2-bedroom, sunroom, 3-bedroom, and average size of about 1,500 square feet. So even though you say quote unquote downsizing, the demand still is for fairly large homes relative to an apartment, relative to even other senior living, both independent and assisted. So, but as Susan mentioned, the key to this is really, we think anyway, better living. People really do thrive, use their skills. There's always CPAs that are on the finance committee, and people are social committees and running the governance of the community. So once the building is built and once it's fully sold out, then we as developer are really out of it. There's a small residential management piece component to it. But really the owners or the members of the community are governing themselves, I guess, is essentially the reality there. So from a risk standpoint and development, having the pre-sales does change. 60% pre-sold does kind of define the market versus typically other senior living. Being on the rental side is all speculative development. So you're kind of relying on market studies and your knowledge of the market. It's very difficult to pre-lease or pre-screen assisted living and memory care. You have to kind of build it and expect that they will come, so to speak.
So Mark, I could just add one more thing too. I think for everyone out there that's a banker or a developer, someone that has not had the experience like UP, it's a long cycle. I think people don't realize, like Mark said, if it's 60, 70% pre-sale, someone is talking to these people daily, meeting with them, picking out selections, picking out units. It's a long sales cycle, and they don't usually sign up the first time. And so you're holding their hand, you're getting to 60, 70%, and then you're building it. And Mark, how long are your co-ops taking? 15 months, 18 to build?
Well,
Longer,
yeah, that's 18 plus, I'd say. Yeah, that's one of the challenges we'll get to in the industry in general. But yeah, it's a long duration.
So some of these, could take almost 4 years by the time you start and end. People thought, oh, I thought it was like 18 months. No, just to let people know, you have to be a patient developer.
Yeah, patience, and there is a heavy sales burden as well, and it is a nuanced enough kind of offering to the market that we have our own internal sales team. So we've got a sales team of 10 plus folks that are dedicated to this. So that's a big commitment by the company. And it's a difficult thing to just go out and hire a Remax or a Edina Realty or something and expect them to kind of understand it and stay with it, like you say, Susan, in the longer term here. So that's kind of the essence of it. I think we can take the next slide. think we probably touched on a couple of these things here, but it really is, I think, ultimately the attractiveness to it from the market standpoint is kind of that active, kind of vibrant community. I think they do like being their owners, so they control their budgets, they control, what the community does for, future maintenance and all those good things. And so that is it's a different kind of security for the senior coming than being a renter potentially for the first time in their lives for many, many years. I guess I would say the one thing on the long-term nature of the cycle that's actually a benefit to these seniors because really, the daunting task of going through all of your stuff, figuring out what you're going to keep. Do the kids want things? I mean, it probably takes our folks an average of a couple of years to really truly get through their home, get downsized and kind of mentally ready to make that move. But it's very rewarding once it happens. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times, and that's really our marketing challenge. Is gee, I wish I would have done this 5 years earlier. Is a typical kind of comment, because once they're there and settled, it's really something that, like I say, gives them, I think, a better life as they age. So the next slide is just kind of a summary of all the different types here, I guess, of potential ownership. So as we talked about, in a typical condominium, you would own your own deed to your co-op, or excuse me, your condo unit, and then you'd have some rights to common areas and that type of thing. Where in the co-op model, you actually own a piece of the entire community. So if there's 100 homes, as an example, you are 1/100th of ownership there, and you have one vote out of 100 moving forward on operating the community. And then renting obviously is pretty straightforward. What gets a little mixed out there, there are some senior communities out there that do have a small buy-in component to it. Typically, it's to write down the rent that you have to pay moving forward. And then a lot of times that is returned somewhere between 80 and potentially up to 100% of that down payment. But that money is used, I think, from the operating and development company to kind of keep the operations going of that particular community. Don't know if there's anything else there. I think we can go to the next slide.
Next slide. Next slide. So Julie, do you want to kind of start with the opportunities and challenges, and then I'll kick in more on the challenge side?
Absolutely. And for those of you, the co-op model is something that is not widely utilized across the country, and it was something that I was pretty unfamiliar with before joining Ryan Companies, because it is so prevalent in Minneapolis. So Mark and Susan, thanks for that overview, and it is such a unique product to the Minnesota area that and there's the success of that in that area is very interesting, because it is such a different product in the market. As we talked about earlier, there's lots of opportunities in senior living with the strong demographics and the institutional equity that's very interested in this product type. One thing during COVID that we really took on as an opportunity, there's a lot of operators who suddenly were sharing learnings and how do we do things, and what are the best practices, and how do we get things done, which was not necessarily the case pre-COVID as an industry. So I think that is going to open up a lot of opportunities about really continuing to evolve our business and taking advantage of things we learned during COVID. And then the other is unique products. And so much like the co-op, there's some other unique products that are popping up across the country. There's a big movement, not just in senior living, but in traditional multifamily. They've started getting the the rental market of single family homes that are being built specifically for renting. And that is certainly a product in senior living that's gaining some traction. There's a couple communities here in Austin that are being built just south of the city. And it will be interesting to see how those evolve and continue to crop up across the country. But you know, the pandemic certainly has bred a lot of innovation in our industry that's been not quite pushing the envelope for the last several years. So it's been great to see a lot of the things that come out of this. You know, we have a lot of challenges in our industry, and Susan and Mark are going to share some of their perspectives as well as we sort of go through each of these topics. COVID-19 certainly presented a huge challenge for us. We sell a lifestyle. We sell the social aspect. One of the biggest components of moving into a senior living community is that socialization factor. In today's world, you can get food, you can get care, you can get pretty much everything delivered to an elderly person living in their home by themselves. The one thing that's hard to provide them is that socialization piece, and we certainly, that's one of our biggest selling points, and we think an incredibly important component of the senior living industry. And COVID-19 really challenged that because we were not able to provide the social aspect of what we do on a regular basis. And certainly there's been plenty of studies about the mental health of our residents and the fact that they weren't able to socialize or see their families. And certainly that impacted our occupancy, that people moved out, people didn't make a decision to move in because they wanted to continue seeing their family. And then of course, certainly COVID cases within our communities resulted in deaths as well. So as we're coming out of this, some of those challenges, it continues to be, you know, a challenge as we think about what does the future look like? Does it change how we design building? Does it change how we operate buildings? And how do we move forward? Certainly, and then the vaccination, you know, across our portfolio, residents embraced the vaccine because they wanted to get back to normal. And so that's been really great. The biggest challenge for us has been on the employee side and their acceptance of wanting to get vaccinated in order for communities to return to normal. And Mark and Susan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I agree with everything you said. And I think the biggest thing with the COVID-19 was, like you said, they were isolated. All the meals were being delivered. They said their appetite wasn't where it was. They missed the exercise program. They missed all the events that they were going to, the music. So that was hard. And then they're scared, and their families were upset that they couldn't visit if there was a COVID outbreak. And we were just trying to keep everyone safe. And so it was not easy. It was not easy on the families, the senior living in these buildings, or the staff. And because of that, of course, you mentioned it too a little bit, Julie, occupancy levels. We had people die. We had people move out. We had people that the adult daughter said, maybe I'll take them home. Now we are seeing a bounce back after COVID now, which has been wonderful. It's not quite where any of us expected. Minnesota occupancy is up higher than a lot of our peers or other states. And we just continue to do the sales and marketing. And one thing, as much as it is a challenge, Ebenezer really never gives up. We kind of hunkered down. We had meetings. Let's do things different. Let's think out of the box. What can we do different? We just said, no matter what, we're here. We're not giving up. And we're just going to have to do things different. And how could we design larger community areas so you could have the 6-foot distancing, and we have more Purell stations. We've been putting more of the, I don't know what you call it, the paddle or the button to push through the restrooms, the construction piece, but so that they don't have to hold everything with their hands, they can touch it with their elbow. So all these things going forward, people want to say, how can I how can I be safe and what can we do differently, even if it's something small. The labor shortage. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was
Doc.
just going to say, one, I guess, detail we did not speak to here is, Julie and I, as developers, we are reliant on third-party operators. So we're not operating these communities directly ourselves, especially on the healthcare side. And so, I think there'll be a shakeout there as well. So, kudos to you, Susan and Ebenezer, for kind of rising to the occasion. I think there will be plenty that haven't or won't get out of COVID as well. And so that's always something too. That's a big underwriting for us is the operator in that particular market and community. And then I think labor shortages certainly is part of it. I think just overall costs in general on the operating side. We've seen, at least on the occupancy side, a full bounce back in occupancy in our portfolio, but not necessarily on the expense and margin side. So that's kind of an ongoing challenge here in the near term anyway.
Yep. We have quite a few people calling, and I'm always the first call with business development. And of course, with the labor shortages, it's kind of like food or a drive-through. I know what Nick, one of the biggest bullet points this year is going to be, do we have to raise the rent and what do we have to raise it to help with the margins with the labor shortage? And that's pretty much what people go back to, is someone's going to have to pay for this, because we are the wages are going up, the bonuses are going up, and unfortunately we've had pool, which is bringing in the pool to help with the staffing, and that's not cheap. And so that is really our biggest issue. And then in some of our wealthier zip codes in Minnesota, they all sent their kids to college, and we don't have as many worker bees. So we have these gorgeous properties in these high-end zip codes that everyone wants to live in, but there's usually not light rail, bus, parking. And so that's, how do you get all these great staff there when cars at an all-time high if their car breaks down? So we're just constantly trying to help all these employees get to work, because we hear that, we're hearing it every day. And again, we're just gonna keep going forward. Like Mark said, I think the biggest shakedown is we hear a lot from other operators that said, we don't have, we have almost 125 people at our corporate office with the pool and backup to help. And they're saying, I didn't have anyone. So my nurse went out for COVID for 90 days. I didn't have anyone to cover. I didn't have any backup. So I think you're going to hear that. And then smaller one owner are saying, I don't know if I signed up for this. So a lot of changes there too. So Mark, do you want to talk about construction costs? Or Julie?
Yeah, certainly. So certainly challenges are coming from all sides. In addition to the expense side of the equation, construction costs and supply chain issues continue to impact this product type as well as other product types. And unprecedented increase in wood pricing this year, that certainly grabbed the headlines, but it's really across the board that everything is increasing at unprecedented rates and very unpredictable. And so pre-COVID, at least we had a little bit more predictability about what our cost increase would be, and now it's a little bit more of a doing the best we can, and then something else shifts in the market. Certainly supply chain issues have impacted cost and then delivery of materials on time, and that's even been affect schedules of getting these projects completed and available for our residents when we indicate that we thought we would be open. But pre-COVID, we were typically doing about a 4 to 5% increase per year, and there's been some quarters where it's been 4 to 5% per quarter over the last 24 months, and that makes it tough to get some of these projects finished. We've been very fortunate because we are a nationally a national general contractor and developer, we've got strong relationships, and we do enough volume that we can negotiate some good deals and lock in some pricing as we're working through this. But it certainly has impacted the number of starts in our industry in the last 12 months. I think they've dropped by 50% over the last 18 months, and that's a function of construction costs just making deals that once penciled and hit the returns that investors were looking for really significantly changed the outcome of what those investment returns would look like.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, the duration. You mentioned that from a supply chain standpoint, but just industry-wide over the last 10 years, the duration of these projects has increased, which again makes it harder and harder to hit the returns that you're looking for. An example, I remember we were probably one of the only 101 unit deals under construction in the fall of 2009. We were able to start a co-op community in Bloomington, somewhat of a testament to that market, I guess. But we got that project done in 10 months. 101 units, 10 months. It was perfect. Everybody had their construction A team working on it because there weren't very many projects going. And yeah, we literally are looking at durations double that now, and that's not including supply chain hiccups potentially. So that's a big reality, and it's everything in the pro forma. It's the cost of insurance for wood frame construction's gone crazy lately. All of those kind of pieces are really kind of keeping us on our toes, I guess, to say the least.
Yep.
Yeah, regulations is a bullet point here. I think that it is an industry, again, because of primarily on the assisted living memory care side of the business, but it is a regulated business. And so we are going to probably see more and more regulation as the senior population increases. As we said, this unprecedented really number of folks kind of becoming seniors here in the next 15 to 20 years. So regulations will increase in Minnesota specifically. We have seen a big change here just implemented as of August of this year. So there are new licensing requirements that I'm certain Susan could talk for the rest of the time on all the details she has to deal with. But from a development standpoint, so physical plant, we were able in a wood frame structure, we were able to build assisted living and memory care in 4 and 5 story structures, which created some efficiencies. Obviously had could have a smaller footprint for land and all of that, and that has significantly changed now, where wood construction for memory care is limited to a 1-story building situation, and assisted living to a 2-story. And so we don't know exactly how that's going to shake in the market here. We're coming up with designs, of course, that can accommodate that, but the cost of that is, again, much different than traditional. The land requirement is increasing, and we'll just have to see, how that shakes out specifically in Minnesota. So that may, again, put a governor on new supply here for the near term anyway. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to talk about on regulations.
Just until they kind of, like you said, we had to figure out the new regulations. We know the seniors are coming, but you mentioned, Mark, you need more land. That memory care is now going to be kind of shooting off to one side or another. That means longer hallways for staff, supplies, bringing things down. That's not going to change. We're going to have to figure it out. And then you mentioned, all the new license and the new coding. We had someone trying to figure all that out 6 months prior, because there's a whole new way to do assessments, medications, food. I could go on and on. Just know that luckily we had someone, that it's all, as of August 1, it all changed, and we were ready to go. Is it easy? No. Do we, we love the old way of building, but it's changed and we're going forward. And as far as regulations too, the architects really are the experts on exactly how all these new changes work. Next slide.
Yeah, do we want to hit a couple of questions that are coming up in
Oh,
real
sure.
time here, or how do we want to do? I don't know. I thought
Stephanie,
yeah, I'm just seeing, are the increased costs being passed on to residents, or are developers slash sponsors lowering their return expectations? Um, I would say a little bit of both, probably, unfortunately. Yeah, so the industry's
yes,
returns have certainly diminished. Um, and the challenge, I think, as we mentioned, is trying to increase rent rates at a time when you're still trying to push occupancies coming out of COVID has been a little tricky. And it's the industry is generally fragmented. You know, it's a fairly there's a lot of operators out there, a lot of developers out there, and so timing of when those things happen ultimately industry wide. Correct me if you disagree with me, either Julie or Susan, but I think in the near term here, it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag. Long term or midterm, the industry has to kind of reassess rent rates to get back to making the margins that are required. So I think everybody's going to have to increase the costs, which
yep,
is a bummer. But
Yep. And, we were at an interesting place last year for rental increases is, we were not providing everybody the services that they had signed up for, and yet still went and in most of our communities went ahead and did our annual rate increase. And a lot of that had to do with on the existing communities had to do with these labor costs and a lot of these other costs that we had to deal with during COVID. And we were very concerned that would have a negative impact on residents. And surprisingly, most people understood that there was a cost to be passed along to the residents as a result of these increasing costs. I would agree, and I on the trying to get developers and sponsors to lower their return expectations. It's been slow going on that front, and certainly our challenge as developers are to find other ways that we can save money or save time. And that's just going to be an ongoing challenge. The easiest projects to get done right now are the ones in the higher rent areas. Certainly because of the cost pressure. The downside of that is a lot of the residents can't afford necessarily the high of the high end. And so we as an industry really have to figure out how to get creative and figure out how we can build communities that more of the population can afford.
yeah,
so,
I guess I would
yeah,
just comment I think we've seen a general increase in community size as well, which is a little bit against kind of resident experience, honestly. But obviously, more units, you're trying to spread fixed costs across more units is obviously how some of the folks are making the pro formas pencil.
well, and whoever asked the question too, we have two markets we market to, the adult daughter or the adult son and the senior. So we run two different marketing campaigns, and there's both of them, and educating both of them. And I've been getting a lot of calls from people from other states too, saying, are we going to go to a 6-month increase in another 6 months? Are we maybe going to have to do that depending on food, labor, cost? So I think all of it's on the table, and we're trying not to do so many changes because with COVID they've had a lot of changes, but we might have to be open to it. But they're used to a yearly increase, usually a cost of living anywhere from 3 to 4%, and those days might be over too. And so we're kind of talking to different owners, developers daily about what can we do, because all these wages have gone up, food's gone up, shipping's gone up.
Yeah. All right.
So
Well,
Mark, yep.
in the interest of time, yeah, we could probably keep cranking along. I think this next slide was really, we actually have a couple that are similar, but just again, getting back to kind of this unprecedented growth in the senior population is ultimately what we're showing here. And, we can leave this slide for you to move forward. The next slide, I think, is a little bit, I always kind of look at this as the hockey stick slide. So, we've been doing senior housing for about 20 years. And yes, we've been in a growing market, but as you see here, starting in 2020, we really are now hitting the accelerator on what we think is, the wind in the sails of the senior living kind of sector. So despite all the challenges, I think there was a question here: is our 8,000 units annually going to satisfy the demand? Potentially not, but we also know penetration rate here in Minnesota is actually fairly high in the mid-teens, I believe, of kind of seniors that choose community-based living. But we still know the vast majority of seniors would prefer to stay in their home. And our challenge on the marketing side really is to convince them that you'll live a better life in community and with social ability. And we are, I guess this chart just kind of tells us why we're sticking with it here and trying to figure it out. The next slide, I guess, again, is just some detail that we can leave for all of you. But average community sizes, I guess this kind of speaks to it as well. We probably are not building enough total units, and that's the hard part is you don't want a community so large that it just is unpersonable and people are kind of not attracted to it. So we're trying to stay in that 100 to 150 unit range. I know, Julie, you've done some bigger communities, but they do. Part of it is the duration. So one of the challenges I guess we didn't talk about was capital duration. So not only does it take a while to build them, but if you factor in a couple of years of lease up time, and that's probably with a 150 unit property. If you had a 250 unit property, do you really want to wait for 3+ years to lease it up and turn your capital there? So that's a balance, I guess, for us developers, if that makes sense to you. This chart here shows that Minnesota, as Susan mentioned, is doing better than national averages. However, I would say these current occupancies on average do not justify new development. So we're looking at 92 to 95% kind of stabilized occupancies across our new pursuits. I don't know if that's kind of what you're looking at, Julie, but clearly you got to find a sub market that you believe will outperform averages, I guess is what I was going to comment there. Next slide, I think we can jump to.
Yeah, you'll go ahead.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Here's just some different developers, different owners, and not that we're endorsing any of these. We want to make sure, but it's just kind of a snippet of what's out there. I just want to mention something about what Mark said, going to the slide before. The average senior lives 2.5 years when they are in an environment where they are enriched, they are not lonely, they're getting together, they're eating better meals. And then, sorry, my allergies. A lot of them have said, I want to stay in my own home. Well, since Ebenezer also is part of a home care company, it's getting harder, folks, for everyone to stay in their home too, because the staffing, if they would need around the clock, it's not easy. And so, taking all that into consideration, it's much easier to find a staff in a building versus everyone that wants these in their own freestanding home. Mark, do you want to mention anything or then go on to your local projects?
Yeah, no, I think, just again, I think we mentioned it. I mean, the industry is relatively fragmented. And so depending on the specific market you're working in, you'll encounter different players. I would say in Minneapolis or Minnesota in general, on the operator side, we don't have too many large national operators here. So we have a lot of folks like you, Susan, Ebenezer's of the world, Presbyterian Homes, those folks that have kind of grown up in the nonprofit world and the kind of the faith-based world here in Minnesota, which is not seen across the country. I would say I'm certain Julie's probably running into more larger national operators out there than here in Minnesota. I guess that's all I'd say. Yeah, so next slide, trying to kind of keep moving here for folks. I guess all we were going to say here is just simply that we are in all three kind of phases of what we've talked about. So we are pursuing cooperatives. So that's our Applewood Point brand. We are pursuing the active adult or 55 plus communities, and that's the Point brand, soon to be rebranded here, soon to come. So I'll leave that little cliffhanger for you there. And then Cherrywood Point is our continuum in our care community. So we typically have independent assisted living and memory care in our care communities, but we are actively pursuing. Obviously the co-op models are for sale property, and we're doing that here in Minnesota and Denver. And then the rental communities we're pursuing in Minnesota, Denver, Austin, and Southwest Florida. Next slide.
Yep, and we included some of our local projects here, and St. Cloud, Minnesota, Woodbury broke ground last week, and that's a partnership with Great Lakes Management that's based out of Minnesota, and then the Highland Bridge project, which is in St. Paul, and this is a partnership with Press Homes, which is currently under construction as well. And something that Mark mentioned earlier is there are a lot of nonprofit operators based out of Minneapolis, and so Ryan Companies does partner with nonprofit operators to design and build these other ones or projects that Ryan designed, built, and invested in. We've got 25 projects across the country, and our growth is really throughout the country. So Florida, Midwest, West Coast, and the South Central regions, as well as the Great Lakes. And so certainly have projects all over the country, but wanted to highlight these three.
Next slide.
And then I think we wanted to leave you with some resources real quick here that if you have a need to learn more about senior living, there's plenty of resources out there if you have loved ones that you need some advice. It's a product that you don't shop for till you need it, which is sort of unique, and so it's often overwhelming when the time comes. Also wanted to point out in the NAIOP Fall magazine, there is an article that gives you a lot more information about the senior living sector.
Also, Minnesota Leading Age is very active. So you could just Google any of these resources like Julie mentioned. And I think this is interesting that this is the first time NIOP has done the senior housing. So that says a lot about how the world's changing too. Now, question and answers.
Okay, got 1 minute for a question.
Or a couple, I guess.
Yep.
We do have one question that came in on the chat. Has senior living seen many modular designs for expansion?
They've been talking a lot about the modular, and I know there's a company in Minnesota that's working on that. Julie or Mark?
Yeah, we've looked at it. Certainly on the co-op side of things, that's difficult because we do customize the individual finishes of each home within a broader range. We try to keep that somewhat limited, so we're kind of balancing a production build kind of timeline with some customization of the homes there. Theoretically, you probably could do that. I think the hard part is given the licensing across communities. So if you had multiple projects in a specific community that you just wanted to replicate a prototype, it's possible you could do that. We have not done that to date.
Yeah, and we've done some exploration of it, and it's proving a little challenging for all the reasons that Mark outlined. And we're continuing to figure out is there a place for it in our portfolio with some of our more consistent designs that we have across the country with some of our operators. And I think it will we'll continue to monitor whether that shift makes sense.
Okay, we
Yeah,
have one last quick question. Does aging in place pose a challenge to some of the more traditional senior living options?
I could talk about that. So now aging in place is going to be different in a co-op where it's much younger. So, but as far as your normal IL, AL, memory care, aging in place, it again, every operator has a little different um, product that they're putting out there. But for us, aging in place is perfect because we already have the nurse, we already have the food, we already have the activities, we have the storage for the supplies. So we want people to age in place. We want people to come in and pick their apartment and their view, and then we'll just continue to bring the care to them whenever they do age in place. And then that's a really good question because a lot of times the adult daughter would say, can you even bring in hospice for end of life? They sold their home in whatever suburb in Minnesota. Now this is their home. They don't want to leave and go to a hospital or something else. And so, yes, we can even bring in hospice to the end of life so they could stay right there.
Yeah, I would say just a nuance there. So Minneapolis or Minnesota has been benefited from the ability to quote unquote age in place. But pick an apartment and stay there and bring in services as you need them. Under the new regulations, I'm not 100% certain we can do that anymore.
Right.
And then in other parts of the country, you can't either. So that's unfortunate because that's what the customer wants, is to
Yep.
be able to age in place in that particular home. But I think a move within the community is going to be required as we move forward here with different regulations.
So we're just figuring out a happy medium with the new regulations.
Yep. All right.
All right, well, it looks like we're at our end time. So I just want to thank the speakers for sharing their wisdom with us this morning. And thanks to everyone who was able to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. If
All
there's
right.
one pearl of wisdom,
you for
tell
having us.
people to fall in love with this industry. We need more help.
That's right.
Thanks,
Yep,
everybody.
you got it. Thanks.
Yep. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.